Hello and welcome. Today we are in the tier 10 Japanese Sky Menace, the Hakuryu. And we're playing on the map North with a thunderstorm. And the first thing I do in the Hakuryu is launch my rocket planes and fly basically to the middle of the map, because there are 4 destroyers on both teams, meaning that there are lots of targets to try to find. The way to find destroyers though, as a CV, is look on your side of the map. Think of the cap zones as though the middle part between your team and the enemy team, and basically mirror what your team is doing to the other side. And that's what you should expect the other team to be doing. So destroyers should be about the same distance from the caps, which makes it rather easy to find them, and they're usually in similar positions too, which is how I found this black, for example. Although, you know, the fact that you know the map helps quite a bit too, but still, you can basically look at the state on your team at the start of the game and expect that the enemy team does roughly the same thing. If there are at least 4 destroyers, that is, or 3 or something along those lines. If there's only 1, sure, it might be quite a bit more difficult. And this is actually quite important in the Hakuryu, because you need to start your rocket plane attack quite early, as you just saw here, where unfortunately I managed to not hit the Asashio. Luckily though, I made it to the black, so I could still do some damage with those rocket planes. Next up, I launched the rocket planes again, because I want to go harass some more destroyers. Because, well, this time I only have 6 planes, so I'm only going to do 1 attack. I'm gonna attack and then pull back immediately. However, the reason why rocket planes is because, if you look at the minimap, about the only ships viable targets for something like torpedo bombers or dive bombers are the ones on the eastern flank so far that we've seen. There's likely too many ships on the western side, considering how many ships are missing on the eastern side, so it's likely very difficult to hit the battleships or cruisers in the back, because usually there are these hidden cruisers and whatnot that are just sailing somewhere along with the battleships, and then when you try to go attack them, it's like, oh, surprise, Worcester. Yeah. Then you're like, well, rip, I guess all of my planes go away. Well, that's probably not what's gonna happen. You're just gonna press the F button and then hope that most of your planes get away, because you're not going to be able to succeed in the attack anyway. I'm going to do this attack on the Monarch herself, because I might not be able to get the DD, but since the destroyer went exactly the same way, I'm gonna go for the destroyer. So this is basically something else you should do. That is, if you can have multiple potential targets, it is a good way to attack. Even if you don't see the destroyer until you're very, very close. You know, if you can't do the attack on the destroyer, you'll do the attack anyway. But this time we'll use rocket planes. We're going to dump lots of these torpedo bombers, because as you can see, there were initially 12 torpedo bombers, but you can only drop 2 torpedo bombers per side. Also, I'm being attacked right now by the enemy CV, which is why I started moving forward. I should have done it slightly earlier though, because this is probably gonna hit. Anyway, you want to dump these torpedo bombers because they'll fly back to your ship. You're not gonna be able to do all the 12 attacks anyway. You're probably never gonna do more than 3, or almost never, which means that it's better to send them back immediately, because if you do those attacks, you're going to find that if you run into an unfortunate situation, that is a surprise Worcester, for example, or something, or maybe a bunch of flak bubbles, you'll lose a lot of torpedo bombers that you would never have used anyway, so it's better to dump them into the water. But keep in mind that as a Hakuryu, your torpedo bomber or torpedo range is very high, so make sure you don't hit any allies by accident, because it is entirely possible to hit ships you don't intend to hit with this kind of stuff. In fact, you'll see a clip at the end of the video about this, probably. Anyway, I managed to get the flooding on the Monarch, so we're gonna launch torpedo bombers again. We're gonna dump them into the water again. As you can see, there's nothing here, only the Shimakaze is. So I just need to make sure that my torpedoes aren't anywhere close to where the Shimakaze could potentially go, and then it'll be fine. It's even better if you can drop onto the island, but you want to drop something like... You want to do like 3 drops into the water before actually attacking with Japanese torpedo bombers, ideally. But this time though, because I'm so close, I don't know if I can do that. I'm gonna do 1 long range drop, then I'm gonna hold down the S button, and I'm going to try to do a proper drop on the battleship itself. Now, this kind of stuff is actually why I'm not going to tell you my captain skills or upgrades, because I'm not sure what the best options are for them. Because, you see, right now you saw the drop, I'm with the full speed upgrades, etc. But I don't know if this is the best, because I could barely make the 2 drops like that. Because my planes are fairly fast. I think maybe the HP upgrade could actually be better than the speed upgrade, because then then I could more easily do these double drops where I drop from far away and then drop again. Because, you know, if your planes are slower, the time it takes to recharge your torpedoes will... you'll fly a shorter distance in that time, basically. Now, in most cases, the first drop doesn't really help too much, but sometimes it can help, and if you can, you know, easily hit them or by accident hit ships twice with drops like that, I think it's always useful to try. And so that is something I've tried doing, but I've found that my aim tends to be quite off. Especially because I'm not very good at predicting what the enemy is going to do. But I'm sure with experience, you know, I'll get better at it, because I honestly haven't played too much CVs, especially Hakuryu, in a long time. And so, and I never really got that used to the reworked CVs anyway, so, you know, there's quite a learning curve for me on some of these things. Anyway, we're going to use rocket planes to finish off the Monarch. Maybe we can find a destroyer, probably not though. I wonder if I should go for a strike on the Des Moines at the back. Nah, it's safer to try to fly away. If I can, that is. Okay, I think I got away safely. Yeah, I kinda like the drop idea on the Des Moines. Let's go for her then. Because something you should do when playing CVs is you need to absolutely make sure that you know what your penetration value on your rocket planes is, because that can determine which kinds of targets you should drop with your rocket planes, or not necessarily even which kind of targets, which places on ships you would like to hit with the rockets. So for example, Hakuryu rocket planes aren't quite as amazing as the Midway rocket planes. As Midway, you're much more willing to strike battleships, for example, because they tend to actually deal damage, whereas Hakuryu rocket planes don't deal much damage to battleships, only what they hit on the superstructure. Whereas something like a Des Moines takes basically the same type of damage from both. This time though, we're using AP dive bombers. Obviously they're worthless against destroyers, basically. And we would like to go and drop on that Yoshino in the corner, because, well, she is kind of alone, and I haven't used rocket or dive bombers in a while today, so might be a good idea to do so. Maybe I'll give a float fighter to the gearing somewhere around here. That way the CV shouldn't harass the gearing over and over, although it's torpedo bombers, so the gearing shouldn't care about this at all, but, you know, it's still a nice thing to do. Maybe our gearing isn't very good, so he would screw this up. Even though the dive bombers, the AP dive bombers on the Hakuryu are actually very powerful when they hit, I find that they're very difficult to use. And not necessarily in that it's difficult to figure out how to drop a ship. Well, I guess that is actually the difficulty, but the reason it's difficult is because of the... Yeah, I don't think this drop is gonna do much. I'll try to drop on the Bismarck, but I don't think it's gonna do much. But the main reason it's difficult is because enemies can actually, well, just counteract against this. Because if, for example, let's say a good target for these types of dive bombers is a Des Moines. But the thing is, if a Des Moines is moving around and she starts turning in, or turning out, regardless which way, they basically start turning when you start to drop, they're going to be so much into the turn that the area of your bomb drop that overlaps with the actual target ship is so small that you're quite often going to miss all of them. Which means you deal 0 damage. And sometimes you even if you hit, you don't deal much damage because you get something like an overpen or something else like that. And because of that, I find that the dive bombers are actually much less effective than I would have liked them to be. They're very good when a target is stationary though. They're excellent in those cases. But whenever a ship is maneuvering, it's easy for them to avoid them. So it's very easy to get into situations where you think, oh, I'm going to do so much with these dive bombers because in the past they worked so well for me. And then just go like, oh wow, my dive bombers did like no damage this game. What the hell is going on? Anyway, in terms of the match, we've lost 5 ships, they've lost 3. We've actually lost 4 of our 5 battleships. 4 of our 5 battleships. But we've only lost 1 other destroyer. Well, I suppose they lost the destroyer and 2 battleships. That is quite a disadvantage. I'm just dumping torpedoes randomly, right? And if there are enemy destroyers around, even better. Because if I can hit, you know, the destroyers by accident, that's great. Anyway, I guess we're gonna go after the Yoshino, because the Kofest is next to the Conqueror, and there is also the Hakuryu somewhere close by, meaning that it would impact the maneuvering over there quite a bit. I dropped these immediately because I can see that I'm probably unlikely to be able to line up the torpedoes properly with the Yoshino. And so I'm gonna go for a second strike instead. And this will be it, because the fighters will probably interrupt any more attacks. I didn't get quite enough lead on the Yoshino, because she's a cruiser and she's fairly fast, so if she turns in, it's gonna be 1 hit at most. But that's something you learn as you play as well. Obviously the follow-up is rocket planes, because I saw 2 destroyers, although 1 has been taken care of, but there's still the Asashio. I should also start moving my CV away, because the enemy CV seems to want to strike me, yet again for some reason. Don't do such a thing if you're playing a CV. Just don't. Because if you don't actually sink the enemy CV, your attacks don't do anything. Because, look, I have 13,000 HP. I am still at full fighting capability, because, well, I fight with my planes. I don't go in there to tank damage. If you deal damage to a cruiser or a battleship, that'll affect their fighting capability, right? Because then they tend to stay further away, so that it's more difficult for you to hit them. However, as a CV, I'm gonna stay far away anyway. And what's even worse is that if you don't actually sink me, it doesn't affect my fighting capability at all. I decide to go slightly closer because the enemy seems to be backing off more or less, but I'm going to change my mind soon enough, so don't worry about that one. Because I am kinda asking for it with only 13k HP. Getting this close is a bit silly. Because if we're honest, while attacks on the CV are silly, well, when you're down to 13k HP, it is actually something that can get dangerous. And you do need to pay attention to it. Anyway, I would like to do the drop on the Yoshino, but since the Conqueror is gonna be closer, it's gonna be probably on the Conqueror. Yeah, Conqueror it is. The flak clouds would absolutely not allow Yoshino strikes. Come on, RNGesus! Land the bombs properly! Come on! Okay, so we did 11k damage, but keep in mind that that Conqueror had 0 reaction to me. She didn't turn at all. If she had just turned in one direction, that would have made my bombs likely not hit. Or I would have hit only one of the bombs, if even that. Anyway, next up we're going to be annoying the Conqueror with our torpedo bombers. Actually, I don't know if dropping these torpedo bombers into the water here is that big of a deal, because the Conqueror probably doesn't have very strong anti-air left anymore. So perhaps it would actually be possible to maybe do like 4 drops on the Conqueror with one set of torpedo bombers, but I suppose I can just, you know, take a new set and come back again. I'm gonna start with a long range drop, Maybe I'll get lucky and the Conqueror turns towards our team, because that's what she should do, considering the fact that they're 500 points behind. They really can't afford to be too defensive. I use my heal. I am honestly not really sure how you should be using your heals on torpedo bombers. Okay, those torpedoes should miss entirely. But these should be much better. I know, the damage actually isn't that amazing. And if you actually look at the stats, average damage for like Midway is really down. Like, there are many ships who deal more damage than the Midway does nowadays. Hakuryu though is less so. Hakuryu has quite a bit higher average damage, but it's nothing like it used to be. At least according to Maple Syrup anyway. At least last time I checked, which probably hasn't changed at all. Still though, it's nice to qualify this kind of thing. Anyway, oh, by the way, speaking of attacking the enemy CV, you shouldn't do it, right? But the thing is that you also need to keep in mind that if you're going to attack the CV, use torpedo bombers, because your rocket planes do nothing, basically, and your dive bombers do almost nothing as well. So it's kind of a waste of planes to use them. Anyway, we're gonna go after the Conqueror again. I'm gonna drop a fighter over here. Maybe the Hakuryu doesn't pay attention and just runs into it. Although I think it's unlikely, but it can happen. And I mean, if nothing else, it'll at least buy some time for my gearing, right? Oh, it actually seems the CV changed their mind. Oh no, never mind, they're just going around. It looked like they were like, okay, screw it, I'm not gonna drop the gearing then, I'm gonna go after the Worcester, which is a stupid idea. Anyway, it's only 3 minutes left. The only way for the red team to win is to sink all of us. Which is technically possible. I mean, it's a Worcester gearing and a low HP CV. If I were high HP, this would be an unwinnable game for them. But considering I only have 11k HP, it's technically possible for them to win. Very unlikely, but it's possible. But I think what's much more likely is that I'm gonna go and sink their Yoshino, and then they're gonna cry even more. Well, they're not gonna actually cry, but I think of them as crying because that makes me feel good. Wait, does that make me a bad person? Ignore what I just said. I don't think that at all, okay? I don't like it when they cry. Anyway, Worcester's gonna block B, I'm gonna sail towards C, although I'm never gonna get there. I might as well, because the gearing is going over there as well, and we might as well combine our anti-air. The Yoshino is probably going for the A-cap, this is why I'm going diagonally in this direction. And there she is. And we're gonna try to drop her from the front. If she starts turning, anyway, it doesn't matter, right, left, just put your rudder in full turn, it'll make you take a lot less damage. Yeah, just like she's doing right now. Wait, no, not like that, because she stopped turning. Yeah, this is stupid, don't do what she did. If you're gonna commit to a turn, keep turning. Just keep turning. In most cases you don't want to do that because you're gonna show broadside to a whole bunch of enemy battleships, but at this point there's nothing, so keep turning. Although I suppose the thinking goes, oh, I have to go into the A-cap to block the cap to get points, but there's less than a minute to go. Come on. And, well, unfortunately she just was like, nah, screw it, it'll be fine for the CVs, and, well, obviously it wasn't. And so okay, I guess I didn't get 200k damage. Almost 200k. I'm gonna treat this as 200k, okay? 350, that's gonna be change, okay? We'll add inflation to that, and then it'll be 200k. And almost a million credits, 200k XP, 29k ship, sorry, 200k damage, 29k ship XP, 21k free XP, and yeah, what a nice game. Oh, and I unlocked the legendary upgrade on the Hakuryu, which doesn't do anything because well, the rework happened and Wargaming hasn't actually done anything with the legendary upgrades. Maybe adding them wasn't such a great idea if they weren't going to, you know, maintain them for new ships as a mechanic. You know? Could have made this just an option on the ship itself. Oh well. 2,777 base XP. But here we can see the damage, 53k from bombs, 88k from, or 89k from torpedoes, and 25k from rockets. But keep in mind that the rockets mostly hit destroyers, so that 25k probably did, as a percentage of damage, more, or at least even with the torpedoes, for example. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would like to thank the patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much for your continued support. A new clear sky. I guess the skies weren't that clear today, huh? And I hope I'll see you guys next time.